Welcome back to the Quantum Yoga Podcast. I'm Jonathan Rickert, and today's guest is Dr. Bruce Lipton. For those of you who don't know Bruce, he's a former stem cell biologist and the author of the best-selling book, Biology of Belief. Great book if you haven't had a chance to read that. He taught at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and later performed pioneering research at Stanford University. He's the recipient of the Goi Peace Award and has been a guest on hundreds of TV and radio shows, podcasts, as well as YouTube. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did. Well, let's start at the beginning if we can, because you do have a great origin story on how all of this sort of emerged. And can you take us back in time a little bit to when things really started for you and your work?
Well, in second grade, they started for me because in second grade was the first time I ever looked into a microscope and saw living cells, you know, the typical things like amoeba and paramecium and stuff like that. And as a kid, it really intrigued the hell out of me because I saw them as being purposeful organisms. In other words, they weren't like a pinball just bouncing all over the place. They were like looking over here and then they move over here and look over. So it's like, I looked at that from my kid's point of view and just said, wow, they're like little people in there. And that point of focus really shaped the rest of my developing career until I became an electron microscopist and then went deep inside the cells. So I saw cells from the inside out, from all over the place. And it was real exciting because when I was doing this, and this was back in the 70s, really, where I had a lot of opportunity to do my electron microscope studies, the real amazing thing is I would go to work every day, turn on that microscope, and see things that no one had ever seen before. Every day I'd go, wow, look at, oh my God, you know? So I remember once sitting at behind the controls of the microscope looking in thinking, my God, they're actually paying me to do this. I would have paid them to use this microscope because it's so cool. But so there was a career thing that was like, oh my God, I'm doing career and they're paying me and I would have done it for free. So that was saying I was in the right place. And then I happened to luck out. And I say luck out now because that almost sounds like accidental. I'm going to be honest. My life has been guided without me, with my resistance. It was still being guided to end up where I ended up. I mean, there were events and incidents and things, even a voice is like, okay, Bruce is crazy. There's a voice in his head to go do something. It's like, I look at myself and go, what, are you crazy? And go do it. And every time, it was a major advance in my evolution. So I have to be really honest. Is this an accident or chance? I think, nah, not for me. It was like I was put here. And I was given an opportunity to work with stem cells back in 1967 when I was doing my Ph.D. work. And in 1967, you could count how many people were aware of stem cells because there were so few in 1967. So I was working with a unique experimental model before most people knew it existed. And I was cloning stem cells, which is even more unique because that means I would take one stem cell and put it in a dish all by itself and it would divide every 10 or 12 hours. So first there's 1, then 2, 4, 8, doubling and doubling. And after a week, 30,000 cells in the Petri dish. The most important character is they all came from the same parent. So I have 30,000 genetically identical cells. Well, the real experiment happened when I took those cells, 30,000 cells, and split them up into 3 Petri dishes. So all the dishes had genetically identical cells. But what was different was the culture medium. And I said, well, what's culture medium? Well, we grow cells in it. I go, yeah, it's an environment. I go, yeah, but what does it represent? And it's going to connect in a minute. It represents blood. So I create in the lab the equivalent of blood called culture medium, feed the cells with it. But since I create the culture medium, I had the opportunity of changing some of the constituents a little bit. So I made 3 different versions of culture medium, which means 3 different environments. And I fed each of the dishes with a different version of the culture medium. So in environment A, culture medium A, the cells form muscle. In another dish with genetically identical cells, but a different environment B, the cells form bone. And in a third dish, again, with a different environment and genetically identical cells, the cells form fat cells. So all of a sudden I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I'm teaching in the school genes control life. And now here's a situation where I have genetically identical cells in 3 different Petri dishes that slightly changed the environment, and the fate of the cells was different for each environment. Well, there's only one conclusion. It's like, the environment is controlling these genes, not the genes controlling the environment. But at the time I was doing this, 67, the big move was on genetics. Everybody was getting in genetics. All the money was in genetics. And to me, they were like genetic lemmings. They were all thousands of them, all grouping, going toward the cliff. And I'm standing on the side going, hey, wait, it's not the genes. It's not the genes. And they're just like, yeah, right. And they went on. So there was a point where my research totally conflicted with conventional academic understanding. And so either I am totally screwed and stupid and whatever, or I have something and they don't see it. And of course, it turned out to be the latter, because I was experimenting with something I didn't even have a name at the time, called epigenetics. And I saw epigenetics in 1967 and worked on it then. Officially, science did not recognize epigenetics until 1990. So I was like 23 years ahead of the curve. And the idea is I did not back down and say, okay, this is all artifact, because one of the hallmarks of science that's really important is prediction. If you can predict something, there's a point where you obviously know something about what's going to happen. And my work was totally predictable. I could tell you 3 days before the experiment, here's what's going to happen in 3 days. And it turns out it's like, but it wasn't in the popular vein. And there was a point where doing that research for, started, and just so much stress back from my colleagues who looked at it like, that's artifact, that's not real, that's not important. It was like, what a pain in the ass it was, to tell you the truth. Like, and I said, I just jumped out of the system, because I wasn't going to go back in the classroom and teach a fact that I knew was wrong, because we were teaching genes-controlled life. And my research clearly said, no, that is not true. And so I left the system. Had a, like between meals, they give you a little sherbet to clean the palate so you can start again. My sherbet was I produced a laser rock and roll show after I left the system. Excuse me, found an interesting musician by the name of Yanni, who was the New Age pianist. Back in 1979-80, there was no New Age genre. So Yanni and the show we produced was like, oh my God, there's something, a whole new genre of music came in. And I was successful, except that a family squabble about the funding, because I was the executor of the estate and didn't go over well with some of my siblings. I lost the show just the day after I got a Broadway contract for the show. It's like, oh my God, I got a Broadway contract. Next day, no, you don't have a show anymore. Okay, sherbet time over. Okay, time to go back to work. So
wow.
I started doing some teaching in the Caribbean, which gave me a chance to try out my ideas and teach a course in a completely different way. And it was exciting, because when I came into the classroom, they already had two professors. The first one bolted and left the island. And the second one, who wasn't really a cell biology, histology person, ran a class by opening up the textbook and reading the book in front of the students. And that was his teaching. So I get in there and I'm the third guy now. It's like, oh my God, another guy coming and teach the same damn course. And I figure, well, let's see where you guys stand. I take a quiz that I used at University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and gave it to the students. I think the highest grade was like 50% and the average grade was 20%, which is good guessing at the best. And I said, hey, you got a half a semester left here. You cannot pass this course unless you can pass this exam. I'm not compromising just because you're in the Caribbean. So they were freaked out. They were scared because they already saw, my God, half the semester's over and we got a 0 on the exam. That, it's like, but it was fun because we worked together and worked in harmony, worked in teams, and they worked like son of guns. They really worked hard, and I was there facilitating and helping them. And in the end, they all passed the Wisconsin exam, even though they only had a half a semester. And it really is so good for their psyche. I mean, the idea of coming from way behind and then coming in and passing what the University of Wisconsin students passed. And that was great. It was very uplifting for them, but it was very uplifting for me because I was teaching a course in a completely different way than conventional courses taught. And they picked it up much faster. They learned much more. And the results were very clear. So I had this great opportunity to change the way I was thinking, and then given an opportunity to go to Stanford University to do research on more cloning. And that opened up a whole new insight because of the technology that was available at Stanford at the time. Cell analysis using laser microscopy and all kinds of like new stuff and everything. But what was exciting was after the 4 years of doing that research and publishing the papers, it totally reinforced everything I knew from 20 years before and expanded it to really say, this is the new science of epigenetics, and left the system and said, screw the system, let's talk to the people, because if anybody needs this, it's not the faculty, it's the people outside to know that they've been programmed to be victims, when in truth, they were absolute creators and had no idea that they were creating. And then seeing the world go upside down, and they all felt so depressed and helpless and stressed. And it was like, well, that's because you believe you're a victim. And we had to change that. And that's what my whole life has been about since then.
Let's cut to talking a little bit more detail about biology. And you're one of the things you speak extensively on about is the cell membrane and its critical role in life, really. And so can you give us some context there for people that haven't heard some of your lectures or read your books?
Yeah, well, basically, what's the conventional education? And that is, oh, genes control your life. Genes determine the characteristics. Genes turn on and off by themselves. And as far as you know, you didn't pick the gene. So I said, well, wait, what is this science of genetics really telling you? And the answer is this: I didn't pick the genes as far as I know. I can't change them if I don't like the characteristics. And as far as I know, the genes turn on and off by themselves without me involved. And I say, well, what's the conclusion? And it's profound, because it says, I am a victim of my heredity, which all of a sudden says, then people look at their family lineage, oh my God, there's cancer, there's heart disease, diabetes, whatever. And it's like, oh, I got the gene, I got that. You know, and the one I use in the lecture all the time is because she made such a big deal out of it was Angelina Jolie, whose mother died of breast cancer, her grandmother died of breast cancer. Here she is, a healthy young woman, and she comes to the idea that if she has a double mastectomy, she will never get breast cancer. So she mutilates herself. And I use the word mutilate because a lot of people say, oh, it's a mastectomy. And I go, no, that's cutting your breasts off. I call that mutilation, actually. To do what? To prevent breast cancer from coming by not having no breasts. I go, well, that's a false insight, because the same cancer gene causes uterine cancer and ovarian cancer. So it's like, you can cut your breasts off, but you got to remove the entire thing there if you want to stop it. But the belief was that genes control life. She got the genes from her mother. She's a carrier of the gene, and therefore, in her mind, I am a victim of these genes, and I will remove my breast before I face cancer. Now, and I will be happy. And the problem with that, of course, is she didn't recognize a simple fact, and this is very important. There is no gene that causes cancer. There's not one gene you can show me and say, this is a gene that causes cancer. And I go, for example, she was carrying what is called the BRCA1 gene, which is a conventional, it's called the breast cancer gene. But the important fact was this: 50% of the women that carry the gene never get cancer. So there's a most important conclusion right here is having the gene doesn't cause the cancer. It's not living in harmony with life and having the gene that results in cancer, but the gene itself doesn't cause it. So the idea is Angelina, like most people, have a belief that their genes are operating independently without them. And if they have negative features that, oh my God, I'm a victim, I have no control over it, that's called genetic control by genes. That's conventional teaching. My research was on what is now, actually the name epigenetics was 23 years after I did my first report, epigenetic control. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, epi means above. So when I say epigenetic control, I'm actually saying control above the genes. I go, what does that mean? I say, the control is not in the genes. The control is in the way you are living and your consciousness and your subconscious. These are controlling. And I say, well, why is it relevant? Well, you're in charge of your environment. You're in charge of your thoughts and behavior. And those are the things that control your genes. So if you're in charge, then how can you be the victim? Oh, no. But I didn't know I was in charge. I go, well, that's the problem. The conventional phrase everybody's familiar with, knowledge is power. And everybody goes, yeah, knowledge is power. I go, yeah, but let me tell you to you in the same thing, but in a different way. A lack of knowledge is a lack of power. And that we have been deprived of the knowledge of who we really are and how we operate. So if you're, you're a baby, you're coming into the world and they're programming you, which is actually what happens. If they program you with the old belief that you're a victim of genes, and you're being programmed to be a victim your whole life because I can't control it. And the new epigenetics says, well, wait, it's environment and perception of environment. I go, well, those are things that we can control. And all of a sudden I go, well, wait a minute. With that knowledge, then I don't have to be a victim of my genetic lineage. I can be in control and change my genetics, which is what epigenetics is all about. So I said, so what is the profound difference between what people are taught and the stuff that I was working on, which is now called epigenetics? And the answer is profound. Genetic control, you're a victim. Epigenetic control, you are a master. And that's profound because it says, I'm not a victim of my genes. I can change my thoughts, my beliefs, my perceptions, my environment. And in doing so, I am absolutely controlling my genetics. So the word victim is left out. Mastery is the new insight that we have about our biology.
So the cell membrane itself.
Oh, hey, that was a question you asked a long time ago.
But one of the interesting things, and perhaps it has to do with the emergence of technology too, is that the metaphor that it works as a semiconductor, and that this is sort of what is driving a lot of what's going on in the modern era right now. And that is a way of speaking about this that people can really understand. Maybe it's not a metaphor. Maybe it's actually more direct than that.
It's totally more direct than that. Here's what my work was. I showed that the environment changed the genetics. My colleagues who were into genes said, oh yeah, well, show me how that works. Well, nobody knew how it worked. I just observed it, okay? So I had to spend a lot of time figuring out, how does environmental information actually interface the genetics? So that led me to the cell membrane, the skin of the cell, for the simple reason that's the interface between the outside environment and the inside. And so everything from the outside must cross through this skin to affect the inside. So I started looking at the cell membrane, and in the microscope, it's so simple a structure. It's just like looks like an Oreo cookie, a dark light, dark layer that goes around the outside of the cell, very thin. And the reason why it was important at the time is because at the time, biology had a rule. The more complex the structure, the more complex the function. But when they looked at the cell membrane, it's like, well, it's just a simple layer. It doesn't do anything. So it's like saran wrap, plastic wrap, holding cytoplasm, big function according to conventional biology. But as I started to assess it, and it would happen one night, I was writing the definition of the membrane in a different way than I'd normally written it. So I wrote down, as you started to mention, and this is a fact, these are facts, the membrane is a liquid crystal. Without proteins in the membrane, it's a non-conductor. But when you put proteins like sodium channels, potassium channels, channel means connectors, okay? Well, then now there are pipes that can connect the inside and the outside, but they don't connect it to everything. Only a small number of information can cross through the cell. So I say, well, it's not a full conductor. It's not a non-conductor. It's a semiconductor. So now my definition, the cell membrane is a liquid crystal semiconductor. And the two main proteins that are involved with receiving a signal and sending a signal are called a receptor and a channel. But another word for receptor is gate. So I now complete my definition, 1985, sitting there, and I write it on my computer, I'm typing on it, and it says the membrane is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And I go, ooh, I just read that somewhere. Where did I read that definition? Well, I just bought my first Macintosh, and I had a book from Radio Shack, and it was Understanding Your Microprocessor, a simple book. So I said, oh, I opened up in the introduction, a chip is a crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. I go, whoa, they have the same definition. But as I started to compare part by part, function by function, part by part, it was like, oh my God, it's homologous. It's not like a chip. It is a chip. It's a carbon-based chip. I go, oh my God, what's it doing? Well, information from the environment is typing on the surface, which is a keyboard of receptors, which then calls up programs from where? The nucleus. What's the nucleus? A database. It's programs. And our what we were teaching is your program is your life. Your genes are your life. Epigenetics revealed a different thing. It said, for every gene, based on how you're responding to the environment, you can change the readout of the gene and make 3,000 different proteins from the same blueprint, which all of a sudden says, then you're not locked into your genes. It's a read-write hard drive. The nucleus is a read-write hard drive. The membrane is a chip. And it's like, holy Jesus, cell is a programmable chip. And when I put it in different environments, different programming led to different expression. And so now the important point about it is, it's not like a chip, it is homologous, it's the same as a chip. And once you understand that, then the whole game of understanding biology changes, because it says, what is being typed on your cell membrane? Ha! Because if you know what's being typed, then you know what the function of the cell is going to be. And it turns out, so what did my research show with the cloning? The chemistry of the culture medium controlled the fate of the cells in a plastic dish. And I go, wait a minute, a human, when we see in the mirror, looks like a single entity. And I go, an illusion, because we're made out of 50 trillion cells. And the cells are the living entity. And I go, well, so what? And I say, well, every cell is a programmable chip in your body. And I say, yeah, but just like in the culture dish, it's the environment that is programming. And so I say, culture medium in the dish, what about in the body? I go, well, that was the original culture medium, because culture medium is based on blood. So the blood in your skin-covered petri dish, that's what a body is, skin-covered petri dish, the chemistry of the blood is controlling the genetics, just like it did in the plastic dish. Didn't make a difference for the cell, plastic dish, skin dish, environment. So next step was, well, wait a minute. The blood is carrying information that is selecting the genetics and programming the cell. And I said, but where's to get the chemistry? I said, the brain is the chemist. That's the one that controls the chemistry of the blood. But then comes the last one, and that blew my mind, was, so what chemicals should the brain put into the blood? And it's like, whatever thought you have in your head, the brain's job is to translate it into complementary chemistry. If you have a thought of love in your mind, the brain releases wonderful things: dopamine for pleasure, vasopressin makes you more attractive to your partner, oxytocin bonds you, chemistry bonds you with your partner, growth hormone is released when you're in love, and that enhances your vitality. And that's why when people fall in love, they have so much pleasure, they're healthy, they're vital. I go, that's the chemistry of the blood. From what? Translating love and putting it into the blood. I go, but if you open your eyes and you see something that scares you, I say, you don't put love chemistry in the blood. Now you put stress chemistry in the blood. I go, well, that has a whole different function. That shuts down the system instead of enhancing the system. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, your image in your mind is translated by the brain into complementary chemistry, which adjusts your body to complement the image. If you feel strong and powerful, then the information you send to the cells is going to give you strength. But if you feel you're a victim and vulnerable, then the information is taking away your power with chemistry that says, okay, I'm a victim, and you're creating this. And then I stop. And this moment, I know you want to ask me a question probably, but I'll keep going for one more minute on this and basically say that when I left the university the first time and went to the Caribbean to teach a bit, I picked up a book by Heinz Pagels, a physicist, and the book was called The Cosmic Code. And it was about quantum physics without all of the equations. What does it all mean? And the first and primary principle of quantum physics, which I now sidebar, quantum physics is the most valid science on planet Earth. There is no science that has ever been tested as much and verified to be true as quantum physics. I say, so? Because the first principle of quantum physics is consciousness is creating your life experience. I go, holy crap. The new biology, epigenetics, is the biological correlate of the physics. Your consciousness is translated in chemistry to manifest the expression of your consciousness. And I go, well, that's where the problem comes from, because psychiatrists, psychologists will tell you 70% or more of the thoughts that in the average person's mind are disempowering and self-sabotaging and limiting thoughts. And if you're going to use those thoughts to control your culture medium, then you're going to disempower yourself. And then we find today that the biggest problem on this health problem on this planet, which we're in a health crisis, is disease. And I go, yeah, what about it? I said, well, we used to think disease was caused by faulty genes. Well, less than 10%, likely 1% of disease is connected to genes. over 90% of disease is connected to stress that is sending culture medium conditions that will inevitably cause it to break down. 90% of illness is consciousness. And if people become aware of this and go, wait, my thoughts are, yes, your thoughts are causing this, then there's a moment of potential empowerment. If I change my thoughts, I change my life. I go, absolutely. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I'm not a victim. Nope, you are a master creator with your mind as the creation mechanism. Now, Jonathan, I'll give you a moment. I'll stop talking for a second.
One of the things you referenced in this lecture that I think ties what you were talking about regarding quantum physics to protein control. You referenced a study or a paper that they were working on looking at how they can twist and rotate ethylene, I think it was, using
a molecule, ethane molecule.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was just it was so like material.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing is the question of how does life work? And the answer is this. Number one, we are constructed of proteins. That's what the genes make. Genes are blueprints to make proteins. The proteins are the building block of the body. So the characteristic of your proteins is determining the characteristic of your body. And I go, okay, so cool. I say, so my physical structure is related to my genes. I go, yes. But here's something that they didn't recognize at first, and that is a protein is a physical structure, but in an environmental signal like a lock and key, specific signals can bind to a protein and cause the protein to change shape, rotate, like an ethane molecule. I say, so why is that important? Changing shape is movement. Movement is where life comes from. So I said, well, proteins are involved with life, but they're not life itself, because when a person dies, their body is still there, which is protein, but there's no life anymore. So I said, well, protein alone isn't life. What is necessary? I said, protein plus signal equals life. The environmental signal causes the protein to change shape. The rotation of the protein is movement, which when harnessed can do work: respiration, digestion, excretion, muscle movement. So I say, so what is life? Life is a protein mechanism with signals that are directing the proteins to create behavior, okay? So basically, the study of the ethane molecule was being studied. Why? Because it rotates and moves like a protein. So if you can understand how ethane moves, then you have insight into the foundation of the secret of life, because the movement of ethane is the same thing that happens when life occurs. So they wanted to assess how the movement of ethane was controlled, and conventionally they used what is called Newtonian physics, which is a physics that separates the universe into energy and matter, and says whatever is made out of matter is affected by matter, and energy and matter don't interact. So a human body, being physical, would only respond to physical things, chemistry, drugs, as the signals. So that's the program we get. But it turns out when they were trying to assess the movement of the ethane molecule, it doesn't move by Newtonian mechanisms. It uses quantum energy mechanisms. So energy fields are the cause of what causes proteins to move and generate life. I go, well, that's profoundly different, because in our conventional world, Newtonian physics is the pharmaceutical science. You've got a physical body, pharmaceutical company says, I make you a physical chemical to adjust your body because this is a signal. And it turns out, but it doesn't really prefer that. It prefers quantum signals, which are energy fields, consciousness, thoughts, environmental energy. These are profoundly 100 times more efficient than chemical signals or energy signals. Everybody, before medical school, the only healing that was available was energy healing, hands-on energy healing, spiritual healing, all that's energy stuff. And then medical school comes in and takes us away from the energy and says, take the chemistry. And I go, well, guess what? And this is a fact of science. And I'm not slamming medicine. They slam themselves. In the Journal of the American Medical Association, the journal wrote that medicine is the third leading cause of death in the United States. That was in about 2010, I think it was. 2 years ago, 2016, 2017, the British Journal of Medicine did the same study and came, guess what? After those 20 years, medicine is still the third leading cause of death. I go, wouldn't that give you pause for a minute to say, wait, the health profession is one of the leading causes of death? And I go, and the reason is simple. Their mechanism of understanding how life works is based on a Newtonian physics of just physical affecting physical. But in 1925, quantum physics came in and said, in fact, what you see as physical reality is itself an illusion of energy, and that everything is energy. And that if you understand the nature of energy interacting with energy, then you're going to get the insight into life. And it's funny because Tesla, when he was doing his research, wrote a quote that I love. He said, the moment that medicine starts to look at energy, it'll, create the greatest advance in medicine in whatever time. And medicine is just moving into that energy right now, but the drug companies are manipulating it. And this is why it's difficult to get this information out to the public, because it's not in the interest of a company that sells chemicals to adjust your life to find out that they work, but not as good as just plain energy consciousness. You don't have to buy the damn thing. You can do it yourself. So that information is repressed in the public field because of the money that pharmaceutical industries are manipulating.
Which you mentioned this earlier, but if you keep following this thread back to the signal where it's coming from, you eventually end up in the thoughts and what you're thinking and the emotional content to the thoughts. And if you keep following that even further, you get eventually to where those are originating from. And so this is what you can term the subconscious.
Yes. Okay. To help with this very simply is this, the brain is a computer. That's a fact. Okay. And like a computer, during the development of the brain, the first thing that gets built into the brain is the operating system. Okay, great. Okay. That means I can turn the computer on. But I say, so I get a brand new computer. It's got an operating system. I turn it on and I say, do something like write, draw, spreadsheet. You go, nope, can't do it. Why? First, you have to put the programs in. Then you can use the computer. So it turns out the human brain computer for the first 7 years of the life of a child is not operating at a higher vibration brain, like EEG wires on the head reading vibration. There's higher vibrations of consciousness. Alpha is calm consciousness. A more active one is beta. And I said, but a child's brain for the first 7 years is not predominantly even reaching that vibration of consciousness. The first 7 years, the vibration is more theta, which is actually subconscious. But more importantly, it's hypnosis. So I say, how do you get programs? First 7 years, observe other people like a video camera in a state of theta, and your observations go from the outside down into the subconscious. So the first 7 years is putting programs in. How do you get the programs? Watching other people engage in their program and download it. So the programs that you get in the first 7 years didn't come from your wishes and desires or what you want. They came from observing other people. And 70% of the programs that we download, as I mentioned, are disempowering and self-sabotaging. And then I go, so, okay, I don't want to use a program. I want to be creative, conscious mind, subconscious program, conscious, creative. And so creative has wishes and desires and all those things that you want. So when you're operating from the conscious mind, you're driving your vehicle. Imagine your body as a vehicle with a steering wheel. And when you're driving with a conscious mind, you're driving where? To where wishes and desires, whatever you want. But when you're thinking, you have to let go of the wheel, because thinking takes consciousness. Instead of looking out, it takes consciousness to look inside. Thinking is an inside job. So I say, Jonathan, what are you doing on Saturday? If you're seriously going to answer that question at this 1 minute and it's not written in front of you, where are you going to get the answer from? Thinking. I say, so the moment you're thinking, you have to let go of the wheel and go inside, because that's where the thinking is occurring. I said, yeah, but you're driving the vehicle in the world out here. I said, does that mean you crash and burn? Excuse me. And I go, no, the subconscious is autopilot. When consciousness is thinking, it lets go of the wheel. Subconscious comes in and drives the vehicle with what? Programs. That's how you got the programs in the first place. But the problem is this: where you're being driven now is not toward conscious mind's wishes and desires. You're being driven toward whatever the hell the program you got from other people. And if it's self-sabotaging, you're going to sabotage yourself. And this is the biggest crux of the entire problem here. Bruce is going to narrow it down. The little box, the whole problem is in this little box, and that is this. 95% of the day is the time the average person spends thinking, which by definition means 95% of the day the average person's behavior is controlled by programs in the subconscious, which predominantly came from other people. And I say, well, what's the problem? I say, let me just tell a story. 32 years on the road with the same story, and I'm not tired of it because it's the best story. Oh my God, I almost sound like Trump. It's the best story. But here's the story I want to say. Is that you have a friend, you know your friend's behavior very well, and you happen to know your friend's parent. And one day you see your friend has the exact same behavior as their parent, and this excites you because you can't wait. Hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. And then you back away from Bill because Bill's going to go totally ballistic and go, how can you compare me to my dad? I'm nothing like my dad. I don't know where you get that idea from. And everyone laughs because they've had that experience. I go, this is the most profound story at this moment for this reason. Everybody else can see Bill behaves like his dad. The only one who can't see it is Bill. I say, explain it. I go, well, first, where did he get the program from? He downloaded his dad's programming in the first 7 years. Why is he playing his dad's program? Because his conscious mind let go of the wheel, is inside thinking. I go, yeah, so then whatever is driving the vehicle is not being observed by the conscious mind. I go, absolutely. Completely unobserved. And I say, well, why is that a problem? I say, well, if you got a negative program and then something screws up in your life, you didn't see you were even participating in it because you were thinking while that program was playing. There's a natural conclusion that everybody comes to, and that is, I'm a victim. I wanted to be successful. And look what happened. It didn't work. Something outside is messing with me because I want to be successful, so it's not me. And I go, that's the problem. Because we are all Bill. Every one of us is playing programs 95% of the day, predominantly from the first 7 years of life. And we, like Bill, can't see it because our consciousness is busy, and that's why we're playing the program. And therefore, we all look around and go, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. I go, hell no, you're the damn creator. And then all of a sudden you have to stop and go, what do you mean? I go, with quantum physics, as I mentioned, is the most valid science, says consciousness is creating your life experiences. Now, with epigenetic science, it's go, yep, your consciousness has created this behavior and you were not present because your consciousness was thinking. Therefore, you were playing self-destructive behavior. Everybody's doing it. All of us are Bill. There's nobody that's not. And that we are sabotaging ourselves with these programs because we are not observing it, only leaving us to conclude that we are victims, when in fact we were the creator of all of it.
So the next natural question that everyone's thinking is, well, yeah, how do you change that? How do you get in there and start tweaking the program, recoding?
Well, okay, first let's add something to this, okay, and about this programming business, okay, is that first of all, what are my programs? I say, why? I said, well, you were being programmed the last trimester of pregnancy when it started, and you were programmed at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I say, okay, Jonathan, tell me what program did you get when you were 0? It might be a problem answering that one. Okay, how about 1? No, you don't. That's a hard one too. I go, oh, so basically we were unconscious when the program was occurring. So we weren't aware that we were being programmed. So therefore the biggest issue is this, what the hell are my programs? Because I wasn't there when the program was going on. So then I love it because the answer now is simple, because 95% of our life is coming from the program. Point, our lives are printout of our programs because that's what's running them. So I just say, well, first thing before you change the programs, what the hell are the programs? And the first thing is this, look at your life. Simple point. The things that you like that come into your life, they come in because you actually have programs to allow them to come in. But here's the one you need to pay attention to. The things that you desire, wish for, want, but you have to work really hard for, struggle, sweat over, put a lot of effort into it. Why are you working so hard? And the answer is cool, because inevitably it means that destination that you are seeking is not supported by your program. So you can just say, whatever that destination is, the opposite of that is my program. I can't get that. I can't have that. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. I don't deserve. These are programs, okay? So first you have to assess your life. And I go, well, that's, your life is a printout of these programs, so you can start to see which ones you want to change. And then you say, I want to have a relationship. I go, okay, well then, first of all, if you're struggling, then basically the basic thing is this: your program does not support relationship. That's why you're struggling, okay? So you want to change that. So the first thing, and actually, here's an interesting fact for the audience. In belief change programs I've been involved with, one of the first beliefs we check for, we have people check for themselves because it's muscle testing, kinesiology, is the belief, I love myself. Interesting conclusion, 85% or more of every audience will not test positive for I love myself. I go, well, there's your problem. How can you find a relationship if you can't love yourself? How can somebody else love you? I mean, logically, it wouldn't make any sense. Yeah. If someone said they love you, you know yourself, and you say, I'm not lovable, and they say they love me, then the first thing you do is say, well, you have no quality control, obviously, if you love me, because I know I'm not lovable. And then your behavior will do what? Push them away. And at the end, guess what? You're going to sit there alone and go, damn it, I'm not lovable, you know, and that's why I can't have any love here. And I say, well, yeah, but you can change it. Now, finally, Jonathan, we come to your question, how can I change these beliefs? I say, well, first you identify the belief. And I say, you want to change? I say, well, there's only 3 fundamental ways to change subconscious. And it's different than conscious. So let's emphasize, conscious mind is about 10% of the brain right behind your forehead. It's the seat of your personal identity, your unique character, your spirit. That's where you are in this forebrain piece right here. The 90% of the brain behind that is subconscious, which is a hard drive computer database, basically with programs in it. Okay. So I say the conscious mind is creative. Oh, that's the cool mind. That's the one that says, I want to have a honeymoon experience. I want to live on planet Earth as heaven on earth. I want these. This is what I want. I want a better job, relationship, health. I want. And I go, okay, so wishes, desires, aspirations, conscious mind. Subconscious mind is habit, record, playback. It's all it is, record, playback. I go, and people say, oh, that's where the evil comes from. I go, well, wait, don't blame the mind. That's just a record playback mechanism. It's like a CD player. You don't look at your CD player and say, well, that's the evil CD player if I've ever seen one. It's just a recording device. So the programs could be good or bad, but the mind is a great thing. I'll give you a simple reason, Jonathan. When did you learn how to walk? Possibly before 2. You're still walking? Oh, cool. You know why? Because it's now a habit, and you could walk till you're 100 years old because the original habit from before 2. So habits are cool when they're good, but habits are bad when they self-sabotage. And so I say, well, okay, so the habit mind, subconscious, downloaded the programs. 70% of the download, negative, disempowering beliefs. If you play them on your own machine, you will lose out. And I say, yeah, but 95% of your life is coming from those programs because that's the amount of time that we spend thinking, and that's the amount of time we start playing programs, okay? So I say, I want to change the habit mind. Go, then there's a problem. The conscious mind being creative, read a book, go to a video, watch a video, go hear a lecture, even listen to the stuff that you and I are talking about, Jonathan. Somebody's conscious mind go, oh, wow, yeah, I got it. I say, yeah, but that's the mind that operates 5% of the time. So you could be so smart in your conscious mind, and your life could really suck because you're not running it from conscious, you're running from the habit, which is programmed by other people primarily, okay? So conscious mind being creative, change it in any number of ways. Habit mind, now that's the problem. Because if a habit changes readily, then it's not a habit anymore. You know, thank God it doesn't change. Why? Well, that same walking motion that you're using right now was the original program before 2 years of age, and thank God it doesn't change, otherwise you forget how to walk. So, okay, so we got subconscious mind running 95% of the time with programs in a mind that is habit. So I say, oh, well then not like conscious mind creative, I can change it just by reading a book. You can read all the self-help books you want. That doesn't change subconscious, it changes conscious. That's why people get so upset. Well, I read it, I know all this stuff, but my life is still the same. That was, like, fine, that's conscious information, but if you're only using that 5% of the time, how do you expect to run your life with that? You can't. So I say, oh, we got to change the habit mind. So I say, well, what habits? And well, we just went over that and said, the things that you want, you can't get to, that's a program. So you turn, your wish around to say, Actually, you want to put in a new program. What is it you're missing? You want it to be a real program. I am lovable. I am healthy. I have a good job. Whatever kind of thing you want. That's now I say, I want to put that mind thought into my subconscious. I go, subconscious mind learns in 3 fundamental ways. 1, the first 7 years, you were in a state of theta, which is hypnosis. So if you could do self-hypnosis, you can put data back in just like before 7. I say, well, how do you do that? And I go, a cool part. You don't need to see a hypnotherapist because the vibrations of the brain, the lowest one, delta, is sleep. Then there's theta, which is hypnosis, imagination. The next one up is alpha, calm consciousness. The next one up is beta, focus consciousness. There's even one higher called gamma, which is called peak performance. These are all vibrations. So I said, when you're awake now, and let's say listening to this program, you're in beta. But when you go home and relax and you start to calm down, the vibrations slow down a bit. Now you're in alpha, calm consciousness. But the moment you go to sleep, the moment your consciousness just shuts off like a switch, boom, I'm sleeping. The next vibration as you're going down is theta. That's the same one that you had before age 7. So if you put earphones on at night with a program of things you want to be true in your life, you can select self-help program. The moment your conscious mind falls asleep, the information coming through the earphones is not going into conscious mind, that's shut off. It's going straight into subconscious theta. So that's called self-hypnosis. That's easy. Find a program you want, put the earphones on at night, go to sleep, and while you're sleeping, the words are going to go down into theta, into your subconscious. After age 7, you're not in theta as a predominant state, but you still learn programs. I say, how? Repetition, practice, habituation, repeating something over and over again. You want to play an instrument? Well, it's a nice idea in your conscious mind, but until you practice and practice and practice, what are you doing? Programming. So I can pick up the instrument and later play it without even looking at the notes anymore. Why? I got a program. I can do it. Okay. How'd you do it? Habituation. You want to change something, you got to actually act as if you have what you want. So the typical thing is like people, oh, I'm not happy. I go, then I love it because the new age phrase is fake it till you make it. It actually works. And I say, what does that mean? I say, you're an unhappy person. But instead of standing around going, oh God, I'm so unhappy, change the talk and go, I am happy. Right in the middle of being unhappy, I am happy. I am happy. Every moment you can bring it up in your mind, I am happy. Repetition, habituation, repeating it. There's a point where you'll wake up one day, you won't even have to say it. You'll already be happy the moment you woke up because now that's the program. So habituation, repetition is the second primary way of putting a program in. Create a new behavior and practice. That's what makes it work. Lastly, this is the result of necessity is the mother of invention. Human behavior is precipitating our own extinction at this moment. Human behaviors undermine the environment and we're facing a mass extinction. We're being called on as humans to change our behavior dramatically and rapidly as we can because our behavior is the source of the problem. So in the face of our need, a new way of changing belief is called energy psychology. On my website, brucelipton.com, very simple, brucelipton.com, under resources, I've got about 25 or more modalities of energy psychology. And I say, what are they? They engage super learning. I go, what's super learning? I say, well, maybe you've seen somebody read a book by, pick up the book and move their finger down the page. As fast as they move the finger down the page, they read all the words. Well, that's super learning. I said, well, if you can use that super learning technology with this energy psychology, you can rewrite a belief you had your whole life, 50, 60, 70 years, in minutes. In minutes. The other two, habituation and the first one, self-hypnosis, that's a time thing. It takes a lot of time to repeat that. Energy psychology can help you change a belief in 10, 15 minutes. And so we are given an opportunity now to say, okay, we must change our beliefs. The beliefs we're operating from have disempowered us completely. And in a time when we need it now to save our ass on this planet because we're destroying the environment, now is a great time for super learning to come in here because we can rewrite our programs in minutes. And this is necessary because all you have to do is look at your life and you are missing something that you really want. you're not missing it. You essentially are playing a program that doesn't support that. Because if you put in a program that does support it, it will show up in your life. That's how things work. So we are creating, but with limited consciousness, we're creating a limited life. So it's time for us to change.
What is some of the most exciting research that you're seeing come out now in the realm of scientific inquiry in any field, really, or researchers or areas of interest? Is something that's even interesting
Well,
anymore?
so, yeah, it does, because new science is changing the way we handle ourselves. So, for example, one that's not as new but relatively new for the public is the story of telomeres. You're familiar with telomeres,
Yeah.
okay? So, but what are they? They're extensions at the end of the DNA. So you've got a double helix, which are your genes lined up in a row. And at the end of your double helix, the strands are two separate strands. And if you don't seal them together, the two double helix ends, and they're open, enzymes will attack and destroy your DNA. So at the end, there's something called telomeres that anchor these together. But more than that, they're an extra length of DNA. And I say, what are they for? And I say, when you copy the DNA, there's an enzyme. Listen, I'll use my arm as the DNA. And here's the enzyme. It's like a train on a track, okay? And as it goes down the DNA, behind it, it makes a copy. So it's going down, and it gets to the end of the DNA, right? But guess what? It cannot copy the piece of DNA it's sitting on. So the new piece of DNA only comes up to here. It's shorter than the original one, which is here. I say, so every time you copy the DNA, you lose a piece. I go, what's the problem? I said, well, what happens if you keep copying and then you lose the telomere, the extensions? The next copy is going to cut off the genes. Now that's what causes aging and depression and disease. So I say, oh, so the length of the telomere is related to the length of our lives. That was what the belief was. And in fact, Leonard Hayflick, a scientist in 1960, calculated the length of the telomere, how much is lost each time you copy the DNA, says that a cell can divide about 50 times before it starts cutting into the DNA. It can copy the DNA about 50 times, but each time shorter, shorter, shorter. And about the 50th time, now it's cutting in. And so they calculate, well, how long can a person live with 50 cell divisions of your stem cells? And it comes out, 90 years approximately. I go, wow, how perfect. That's exactly how long we live. Everybody is satisfied. Our life is now determined to be about 90 years. But a few years back, a woman by the name of Elizabeth Blackburn identifies there's an enzyme called telomerase. I go, what's that? It extends the telomere. I go, so what's the relevance? I go, what's the relevance? There is no limit to our lifespan if the telomeres keep growing, because you can keep copying the cell and just make more telomere, more telomere. And so it says, well, then how come we're dying so young at 90? And the answer is because we haven't recognized that our consciousness and the stresses and the things that we've been programmed, they stop the enzyme from working, and therefore your life becomes limited. But those people that have a forward thinking, a positive outlook, they live in gratitude and happiness, and they see the future is good, or more importantly, being in service, which is, I say, meaning what? You have something to do. The feedback causes the enzyme to make more telomere. Why? You're not finished. You got something to do. This is why people who retire generally have a short lifespan. They retire and boom, it runs downhill. Why? What does retirement mean? I'm finished. And so your feedback is, well, I don't need life anymore. Enzyme stops working, boom, life comes over with. So the idea is it's a fountain of youth, but it only works in a positive mode when you love your life, when you have love in your life, when you have a job in your life, when you have gratitude, as opposed to people who live in abusive relationships, PTSD people, bad programming people, all that. Their lives are 90, shut it off, thing done. But for those that look at life as like, I love my life, then the enzyme works and gives you more and more life. So fountain of youth, and it's based on our consciousness. We can engage it or shut it off. So that's good. And then one newer thing that nobody knows about really, except people at the front end of what's going on, are something called exosomes. Somes are bodies. Exosomes are little bodies that are blebbed off from our cells. And they thought it was just waste that would, the macrophages will clean up all this waste, and it's just pinching off junk. It turns out they're actually viruses. We create our own viruses. because it's the highest level of communication. It can zip code a virus to go to a very specific cell type. There's nothing in our biology that can do that. Blood with hormones goes to everywhere. It doesn't go anywhere specific. Nerves don't touch but a small percentage of cells. So when you need to send some important information, like cancer, the cells create their own viruses. And these are called exosomes. And they profoundly change the character of our lives. And they're based then on our consciousness, which is then causing cells to make viruses to match our consciousness. So this is so brand new that they're still not even calling them viruses. They're still calling them exosomes, but by full definition, they're viruses. Interesting point. When they did the Human Genome Project, they said, how many genes program proteins to make a human body? About 3% of the genome is what makes our body. About 5 to 8% of the genome are virus genes to make viruses. That's how important they are. And so why is this important? Because we are manufacturing our own viruses, which control our internal biology. If we understand this, then we would be the masters of the synthesis of those exosomes, which we are, but we have no conscious awareness that our negative thoughts and our beliefs and attitudes are shaping the information of those viruses. We're sending information, and the cells are adjusting their biology based on our consciousness. And exosomes are so new that A, people have never heard of them, and B, people that do know them say, oh, exosomes, and I go, proper name, virus. We are making our own viruses.
Wow. I'm definitely going to look into someone. It's funny you say that, because just last week, someone started talking to me about exosomes.
Yeah, so it's just showing up, but the public has no idea what the hell they are. And it's like, well, they control your fate. I think you should really start to know about them.
Wow. Bruce, thank you so much. How can people learn more about you and follow your globetrotting events?
Well, as I mentioned, the website, straightforward, brucelipton.com, has so much freely downloadable audio, video, printed articles. It's free. Just download all this stuff that we've been talking about. I've got a YouTube channel with lots and lots of videos on it. I have a newsletter. I would love people to sign up for the newsletter because my nephew Alex and I create videos every month. And if you have a chance to see the newsletter, we try to do something that is fun, mainly because if people find the newsletter videos fun and interesting, they each have a point to make. But they're made like edutainment, important education through entertaining, I hope. And we're getting lots of video people are watching these videos, and I really love them. So I would love people to free newsletter sign up on my website, brucelipton.com. and get the monthly newsletter, which comes with a video, informative, generally very fun, and a little bit of a blurb about the message carried in that video every month. So that would be fun if people would sign up for that, because maybe they laugh, and laughter doesn't hurt.